Hey, what's up? Nathan here from PH Studios. Welcome to another tutorial from the Tower Defense Content Series, also called TDCS because it gets too long to keep on saying it over and over and over again. So that's what the TDCS is for. And what we're going to do in this tutorial is an introduction to Photoshop. Now, I did this before, but it is an older tutorial about a year ago, or so. A few months from now, it'll be a year ago. So I wanted to do an updated version. If you wanted to watch the old one, it's still right here in the top of the content list, Introduction to Photoshop tutorial. So you can watch the old one again if you want to. If you go to the main website, phstudios.com, and on the right side you'll see Photoshop Introduction Images. If we click that, you want to download both of those so we can open up Photoshop, and we're not going to be doing any editing. For the first tutorial of any series or any program, I like to just cover the user interface. So even though I'm going to have you download a couple of images, we're just going to use that for user interface overview. Okay, now I'm using Photoshop CS5. If you're using an older version, it might be a little bit different. One of the features I believe is not in CS4 or below, is brand new to CS5. Or it might have been in CS4 and it wasn't in CS3. I'm not exactly sure. I do not remember CS3 or CS4 that well. Okay, so once you open up Photoshop, you should see this. Now, if you're on a Mac, you might see the background of your wallpaper, and you might see a Finder window or something like that on top of it. So what I like to do is I like to go to Window and Application Frame. And this will give us the boxed version, like you see here. Nothing else is in the background. The Finder window is gone away and things like that. So nothing is peeking through the background here. I prefer it that way. If you prefer it the other way, you can just uncheck the application frame. Okay, so now I'm going to open up a Finder window or Windows Explorer, and wherever you saved your files to, the F100_P1 and the PHS SIG of the week, I'm going to drag and drop those into Photoshop so I can demonstrate that. So I'm going to pick the PHS SIG of the week and I'm going to drag and drop. And I'm going to drag and drop there, and that's one of them. And I'm going to take the F100_P1, I'm going to drag it and drop it right in this area right here. And that's going to create tabs. Now that was a feature I wasn't sure about that was in CS4 or below. I know one of those, it's a newly introduced feature. I just don't remember if it was introduced in CS4 or CS5. But we get tabs here, and if you click and hold one of these and move it away, you can make a different window, and each window can have its own set of tabs, and you can combine it to the main window by moving it over here, and you see it that way. And just like any other program, you can, like Internet Explorer or Firefox, you can rearrange the tabs just by dragging and moving it. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this tutorial is just the user interface. I'm not going to go that far in depth. So on the left side, you will see your tools. These will allow you to do certain things, and oops, just one second. Let me demonstrate that. This tool allows us to move the selected layer around or move a group of them around if you have more than one highlighted. So that's what this tool does, and I'm just going to do a brief overview on the tools. This will do a selection. We can select a certain part of the image and delete it if we want to by pressing the delete. And if you click and hold the ones that have the little icon down here, that means that it has additional options. So you just click and hold that and you will get these. So just like these, what these demonstrate, you should guess that this creates a circle, and I can delete that. This is similar. Lasso, it's just freeform selection. I click and hold and I draw. And polygonal and magnetic, we'll go more in depth on those later on. Crop, you're pretty much familiar with crop. You just select a certain portion of the image and click this checkbox and it crop the image. And just things like that. We have gradient, we can make a gradient. Click, hold, and it'll create a line, and then once we release it, the gradient will change based on that line. Text tool, we can create text, and you just click it and it'll load the fonts and all that stuff. And once it does that, we can click new text. And yeah, those are the tools. At the very top of this tools list, if we click this double arrow, it'll change it from a one single column to a double column. Depending on which way you like it, you can leave it that way. Okay, now when we have a selected tool, at the very top we'll have the tools options. So if we have the rectangle marquee tool, we can have separate options here. We can feather it, we can set it as fixed ratio or a fixed size, and things like that. And if we look at the text tutorial, we can see we can change the text tutorial. The text tool, we can change the font, we can set it to a different type of regular, bold, or italics, what size it is, what type of effects we want it to have, and things like that. So that's what this thing here up top does. Now I'm using the default view. You might have a different view and things might be arranged around differently. Okay, so that's what that does. The tab displays the name of the file or the document, PSD document, at zoom level, opening parentheses, the layer, selected layer, comma, and the mode, RGB/8 is the mode. You can also find that by image mode, whichever is checked, RGB color and 8 bits per channel. So that's what the tab displays. Now on the right side we have a color. We can change the RGB values and get a different color. Like we want to create a purple text, new, and swatches and styles are similar. We can pick a list of colors here, and you can double click to change its name, which I just did. And the style, if we want to have a standard layer style, we just click those, and we can save layer styles. And if you have a cool layer style that you created, you can save it for later use, and it'll be in this list. Okay, adjustments. Adjustments will allow us to do certain things to the selected layer or a group of layers below it, which we'll get into later. We can do the brightness, contrast, levels, curves, and exposure, just to name a few of them. There's a whole lot more of them that you can use. I will not go in depth on those right now, but later tutorials will be using adjustments and filters and stuff like that. Masks are for, if we have a layer, we can mask it by only having part of it visible, and you can have that by this little icon down here. And once we create a mask, that's when our settings become active up here. We'll go in more in depth on that later on as well. Okay, so down here we have our layers. And what these layers are basically, if you think of an image as just a standard rectangle, square rectangle, a layer is an image on top of an image that several layers equate to one image. So you saw me have a text here, I have a new here. So even though I hid this bottom layer, this layer is just text. So all these layers, you can have hundreds of layers, all those make up one single image. You can have one layer that has one pixel and stuff like that. And then when you hide one of them, it hides what the layer contains, which is just this eyeball here. So all these layers can combine to make one cool looking image. Like this SIG of the week I did before. This had a layer in the background that was a grungy background. Then it had a layer on top of that was the logo, and a layer on top of that was a adjustment layer that made it a little bit darker and more contrast. And then I had a layer above that which was a filtered clouds, and all this stuff combined created this SIG here, this PH Studio SIG advertisement here. And all that stuff was probably like 30 layers that I had to make. So that's what layers are. We can modify them, we can move them around, move one layer around, we select a different layer, move that around, and that's what we get. We can change the opacity here of one layer, and we can change the fill in another layer. And we'll get into that later on. We can change the mode here to darken, multiply, color burn, just to name a couple. Again, I don't want to go that far in depth on that. Okay, so here we can modify the blending options for the specific layer we have highlighted. Like if we want to add a drop shadow, we can add it that way. We can change the effects here and things like that. So that's for the selected layer. The layer mask I mentioned before, that will allow us to modify what's visible, and as long as you don't apply the mask, you can disable the mask or delete the mask to regain the full layer's visibility. An adjustment layer is what I mentioned up here on top, which is adjustments, like a curves adjustment. An adjustment layer will allow us to have curves or any other adjustment that will modify every layer below it. So if we have an adjustment layer above this new layer, that's the text, and if it's a curves, we can change it to a blue color instead of a green color, and that will also modify the SIG to bring up more blue. Folder, create new layer, and delete. Alright, so that's it for the user interface. Next tutorial for the Tower Defense series, let's go ahead and look at the tutorial list. So we'll just go to the forums, and we'll go to the announcements, and we'll look at the content series, and just look at the, there it is. Alright, so Photoshop. We have an introduction, and now we're going to do a brushes tutorial next. And like I said, I already created them, but I wanted to create an updated version just because I'm creating a whole list of tutorials. Why not make it all brand new? So that's it for the user interface. We'll get into more complex things as we go along, like all these filter menus, analysis, 3D, and all that stuff. But for next tutorial, we'll just focus on this cool thing here. A brush tool that we can brush and create cool effects. So hope to see you next time.